Stay away from my daughter. Richard Whitmore's voice cut through the marble lobby so sharply that even the pianist near the champagne tables missed a note. Dozens of heads turned. Standing beneath the warm crystal lights of St. Catherine Children's Rehabilitation Center was a young nun in a plain black habit. Sister Emily Carter looked no older than 25. Her shoes were modest, her hands empty, her expression almost painfully gentle. And between them stood Richard's 7-year-old daughter, Lily. Richard thought he was protecting his little girl from a stranger. He had no idea he had just ordered away the one woman Lily had never forgotten. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. Now, back to Emily. Only seconds earlier, the evening had seemed perfectly controlled. Richard Whitmore liked things that way. At 42, the Boston real estate millionaire had built his reputation on anticipating problems before they appeared. Tonight, in a tailored charcoal suit, he moved through the charity gala surrounded by executives, physicians, and donors who knew exactly who he was. People smiled when Richard passed. Staff straightened. Doors opened. Beside him, however, Lily seemed untouched by all of it. The little girl held her father's hand without speaking, her pale blue dress brushing her knees as she stared at the polished floor. Too many people? Richard asked softly. Lily gave the smallest nod. His expression changed immediately. Whatever the world thought of Richard Whitmore, no one could say he did not love his daughter. Since losing his wife, Caroline, nearly 2 years earlier, that love had hardened into something more complicated. Fear. Every unfamiliar face became a possible threat. Every unexpected approach made his shoulders tighten. And then Emily saw Lily. She had been crossing the lobby carrying a small canvas bag when she stopped so suddenly that a volunteer nearly walked into her. Her eyes fixed on the child. For one strange second, Emily forgot the music, the donors, even the envelope she had come to deliver. Lily, she whispered. The girl looked up. Something flickered across her face. Recognition. Emily took one cautious step forward. Then another. Richard noticed. His hand immediately settled on Lily's shoulder. Can I help you? Emily stopped. Her eyes moved from Richard to the little girl. Mr. Whitmore? Richard's gaze narrowed. Yes. My name is Sister Emily Carter. I only wanted to. To what? The interruption was quiet, but cold. Emily hesitated. To say hello to Lily. Richard stepped directly between them. That was when nearby conversations began to fade. I don't know you, he said. No, sir. You don't. Then you have no reason to approach my daughter. Emily's fingers tightened slightly around the canvas strap. She could have explained. She could have said one sentence that would have changed the way Richard looked at her. But she glanced at Lily and chose silence instead. I understand, Emily said softly. Richard mistook restraint for surrender. Good. He turned toward Lily. Behind him, Emily lowered her eyes. Then something happened. Lily was no longer staring at the floor. She was staring at the young nun. Her lips parted as though struggling against a word buried somewhere deep inside her memory. Emily saw it. And for the first time that evening, her calm expression broke. Not with fear. With recognition. Richard still hadn't noticed. But Lily's small hand had already slipped from his. Richard did not notice Lily's hand slipping free. He was already scanning the room, searching for one of the event coordinators. To him, Sister Emily Carter was simply another unexpected variable in an evening he had carefully planned. But Lily kept watching her. There had been a time when the little girl had filled every room with questions. Caroline used to joke that their daughter could turn breakfast into an interrogation. Then Caroline died. And something inside Lily went quiet. Richard had spent the next 2 years trying to bring that child back. Specialists came from New York. Therapists rearranged schedules. Richard enrolled Lily in private programs recommended by people whose names appeared on medical journals. He paid every bill without hesitation. Nothing mattered more than his daughter. Yet money could purchase appointments. It could not make Lily trust the world again. Some mornings she spoke normally. On others, she barely whispered. Crowded rooms were particularly difficult. Strangers were worse. That was why Richard watched everyone around her. And why Emily's approach had frightened him more than he would ever admit. Dad. The word was so soft Richard almost missed it. He looked down. Lily was staring past him. What is it, sweetheart? No answer. Across the lobby, Emily remained motionless. For a moment, something passed between the young woman and the child that Richard could not understand. Then an event coordinator approached. Mr. Whitmore. They'll be ready for your remarks in 15 minutes. Richard nodded. Thank you. When he looked back, Emily had lowered her gaze. I apologize if I made you uncomfortable, she said. That wasn't my intention. Her voice contained no anger. Somehow, that irritated him more. Then we understand each other. Emily gave a small nod. She turned away. Her worn shoes made almost no sound against the marble. Lily watched every step. What Richard could not see was Emily's hand trembling around the strap of her canvas bag. She had not expected this. Not tonight. Not after 2 years. Emily had come to St. Catherine's for an ordinary reason. The convent had collected handmade blankets, children's books, and letters for patients undergoing long-term rehabilitation. She had volunteered to deliver the final paperwork before the gala ended. She had expected to stay 10 minutes. Then she had seen a name printed on the donor display. Lily Whitmore. Emily had stared at it longer than she should have. She told herself it could be another child. Then she saw the pale face, the careful eyes, and the tiny crescent-shaped scar near Lily's temple. There was no mistake. Emily knew that scar. She knew those eyes. And she remembered a much smaller hand gripping hers beneath the dim blue light of a hospital room. But that story belonged to another night. Tonight, Richard Whitmore saw only a young nun who had crossed a boundary. Security should probably know, he murmured to his assistant. Emily heard him. She stopped for half a second. Then continued walking. No protest. No defense. Only silence. Richard interpreted that silence as confirmation that he had been right. But Lily suddenly took one step after her. Then another. Lily. The girl stopped. Richard reached for her hand. She pulled it away. His face changed. Lily had never done that before. Across the lobby, Emily reached the elevators. The doors opened. She stepped inside and turned. Her eyes found Lily one final time. The doors began closing. And Lily's lips started to move. The elevator doors were inches from closing when Lily made a sound. Not a word. Just a breath. Richard looked down, but whatever she had tried to say disappeared beneath the soft chime of the elevator. The doors closed. Emily was gone. Lily? The little girl stared at the silver doors. Richard crouched beside her. Do you know that woman? Lily's eyes dropped immediately. Silence. Richard felt the familiar ache of helplessness settle into his chest. "All right," he whispered. "You don't have to talk." But as he stood, he noticed something unusual. Lily was pressing 2 fingers against the small crescent-shaped scar near her temple. Upstairs, Emily stepped out of the elevator and entered a quieter corridor. Only then did she stop pretending she was unaffected. She leaned against the wall. Her breathing trembled. 2 years had changed Lily, but not enough to erase the child Emily remembered. Back then, Lily had been smaller. Frightened. Always searching the doorway whenever footsteps approached. Emily closed her eyes. A fragment of memory returned. A dim hospital room. Rain tapping against glass. A child's hand refusing to release hers. Emily opened her eyes quickly. "No," she whispered. "Not here." She had promised herself she would not reopen that chapter simply because fate had placed Lily in front of her again. Emily continued toward the administrative office and handed the receptionist a sealed envelope. From St. Agnes Convent. The woman smiled. "Thank you, sister." Emily nodded and turned to leave. Then she noticed a photograph on the wall. Richard Whitmore stood beside several physicians, holding an oversized donation check. Beneath it were the words, "Whitmore Family Pediatric Recovery Fund." Emily stared at the picture. So that was Lily's father. The man downstairs who had looked at her as though kindness itself required credentials. Yet Emily felt no anger. Only sadness. Because she had seen fear wearing many disguises. Sometimes it cried. Sometimes it begged. And sometimes, when wrapped in an expensive suit, it sounded like authority. Downstairs, Richard returned to the gala. His assistant, Nathan Cole, approached with 2 glasses of water. "Everything okay?" "Fine." Nathan glanced toward Lily. She seemed to recognize that nun. Richard's jaw tightened. "She doesn't know her." "You sure?" Richard turned. The question irritated him because he could not answer it. "I know everyone involved in Lily's care." Nathan said nothing. That silence followed Richard as he moved through the crowd. Minutes later, he stood near the stage while donors discussed construction plans and funding targets. Normally, Richard could command such conversations effortlessly. Tonight, his attention kept drifting toward Lily. She sat alone beside a window. In her lap was the gala program. She had turned it over and begun drawing on the blank back page. Richard walked closer. A small figure appeared beneath her pencil. Then another. One was clearly a child lying in a bed. Beside the bed stood a woman wearing a cross. Richard's stomach tightened. Lily. She covered the drawing. "Who is that?" No response. He gently lowered her hands. Beneath the 2 figures, Lily had written a single letter. E. Richard stared at it. Then footsteps sounded behind him. Emily had returned to the lobby. She intended only to leave through the front entrance. But Lily saw her. The pencil fell from the child's fingers. This time, Richard saw everything. Lily stood. Her chair scraped loudly across the marble. And before Richard could stop her, she began walking toward the young nun. Lily had taken only 3 steps when Richard caught her gently by the arm. "Lily, stop." She resisted. It was not dramatic. She did not scream or pull violently. She simply leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Emily. That quiet determination unsettled Richard more than a tantrum ever could. Emily stopped near the entrance. "Please," she said. "Don't upset her." Richard looked up sharply. "I know how to handle my daughter." The words came harder than he intended. Several nearby guests turned. Emily's expression softened. "I'm sure you do." That should have ended it. Instead, Richard heard pity in her voice where none had been offered. "You've approached her twice tonight." "I was leaving." After somehow getting her attention. Emily glanced at Lily. "I didn't ask her to follow me." Richard stepped closer, placing himself between them again. "Then tell me how you know her name." A hush began spreading through the nearest tables. Emily could feel eyes settling on her plain habit, her worn shoes, the canvas bag hanging from her shoulder. "I can explain privately." "No." Richard's answer came instantly. "If there's something involving my daughter, you can explain it now." Emily's eyes remained steady. "This isn't the place." Richard gave a humorless laugh. "That's convenient. Mr. Whitmore. My daughter has been through enough." His voice rose. "She doesn't need strangers walking into her life pretending they have some special connection to her." The sentence landed harder than he knew. Emily's face changed. Only slightly. But Lily saw it. So did Nathan. "Richard," his assistant warned quietly. Richard ignored him. "You knew her name. You watched her across the room. Then you approached her without speaking to me first." "I meant no harm. People always say that after crossing a line." Now the room was truly listening. A security officer near the entrance glanced toward the event coordinator, waiting for instruction. Emily noticed. For the first time, embarrassment colored her cheeks. Still, she did not defend herself. Richard mistook her silence again. "My daughter has enough problems," he said. "She doesn't need strangers pretending to care about her." The lobby went still. Emily lowered her eyes. For one painful second, the polished marble beneath her seemed brighter than everything else in the room. Then she looked at Lily. Not Richard. Lily. "I'm sorry," Emily said softly. "I shouldn't have approached you." Richard folded his arms. "Security can show you out." Nathan stared at him. "That isn't necessary." "I'll go," Emily said. The security officer hesitated before stepping aside. Emily walked toward the glass doors. No argument. No accusation. No attempt to embarrass the man who had just humiliated her publicly. That silence should have felt like victory to Richard. Instead, something about it made the room uncomfortable. Then Lily pulled free. Lily. Her shoes struck the marble in quick, uneven steps. Emily heard them and turned. The little girl stopped several feet away. Her chest rose and fell. Richard hurried after her. "Sweetheart, come back." Lily did not move. Her eyes filled with tears. Emily's hand rose instinctively toward her mouth. And then, in a voice so fragile that everyone leaned into the silence to hear it, Lily whispered one word. "Emily." Richard froze. Lily swallowed. Then she said it again. "Emily." The young nun's eyes filled instantly. And before Richard could understand what was happening, his daughter ran forward and wrapped both arms around her. For several seconds, nobody moved. Lily clung to Emily as if the crowded marble lobby had disappeared around them. Emily slowly lowered herself to her knees. Her arms hovered in the air, uncertain whether she had the right to return the embrace. Then Lily tightened her grip. Emily closed her eyes and held her. Richard stood 10 feet away, unable to reconcile what he was seeing with everything he believed he knew about his daughter. Lily avoided strangers. She disliked being touched unexpectedly. Even relatives sometimes waited months before she allowed an embrace. Yet now she was holding this young nun as though letting go might make her disappear again. "Lily," Richard whispered. His daughter did not look at him. Emily pulled back just enough to see her face. "You got so tall." Lily's lower lip trembled. "You left." The word struck Emily harder than any accusation Richard had made. "I know. You said goodbye." "I did." Lily touched the small silver cross hanging against Emily's habit. "You have different clothes." A tear escaped Emily before she could stop it. "Yes." Around them, the gala had fallen almost completely silent. Richard stepped forward. "How do you know my daughter?" Emily looked up. There was no anger in her face now. Only something that made Richard suddenly feel like the stranger. "Not here," she said. "No." His voice had lost its earlier arrogance, but not its need for control. "I need an answer." Before Emily could respond, Lily spoke. "Blue stars." Richard frowned. "What?" "The blue stars, Daddy." Lily pointed upward as if seeing something that was not there. "And the rain." Emily went pale. Richard crouched beside his daughter. "What blue stars?" Lily looked confused by the question. "The ones above my bed." Richard's breathing slowed. There had been no stars above Lily's bedroom at home. But somewhere in the back of his mind, an image surfaced. A pediatric hospital room. A ceiling projector. Tiny blue lights moving across white walls. 2 years earlier. The worst week of his life. Lily continued. Emily stayed when the thunder came. Richard looked at the nun. Emily said nothing. "She sang," Lily whispered. "What did she sing?" Lily could not answer. Instead, she reached for Emily's hand. Richard stared at their joined fingers. A memory he had buried beneath grief and work began forcing its way back. Caroline had been dying 3 floors above Lily. His wife in one room. His daughter recovering in another. Richard had spent those nights running between elevators, doctors, lawyers, family members, and phone calls. There had been nurses. Volunteers. Faces he could no longer remember. "Were you at Boston Children's?" he asked. Emily's eyes met his. "Yes." The single word seemed to remove all sound from the lobby. "When?" Emily looked at Lily before answering. 2 years ago." Richard's face drained. Nathan took a slow step backward. Then an elderly man near the donor tables rose from his chair. Dr. Samuel Bennett, retired pediatric surgeon and longtime trustee of St. Catherine's, had been watching quietly. He adjusted his glasses and stared at Emily. "Sister Carter." Emily turned. The doctor's expression changed from uncertainty to recognition. "My God." Richard stood. "You know her?" Dr. Bennett did not answer immediately. He walked closer, studying Emily's face. Then he looked at Lily. When he finally spoke, his voice carried across the silent lobby. "Richard, you really don't know who this young woman is?" Richard swallowed. "No." Dr. Bennett's eyes hardened. "Then before you ask security to remove her again, perhaps you should learn what happened the night your daughter almost died." Richard Whitmore felt the room tilt beneath him. "What do you mean, almost died?" Dr. Bennett looked at Lily before answering. "Not in front of her." Emily immediately nodded. "I agree." But Lily tightened her fingers around Emily's hand. "I want Emily." Richard opened his mouth, then stopped. 2 years of therapists had taught him never to force Lily through fear. Yet tonight, he had done exactly that. Dr. Bennett led them into a quiet consultation room away from the gala. Nathan remained outside. Emily sat beside Lily on a small couch while Richard stood near the window, still struggling to understand. "Tell me," he said. Dr. Bennett exhaled. After Caroline's condition deteriorated, Lily was admitted downstairs with complications from the accident. "I remember." "Do you remember December 17th? Richard's jaw tightened. Of course he remembered. Rain had battered the hospital windows that night. Caroline's doctors had called him upstairs shortly after midnight. They told him his wife might not survive until morning. Richard had left Lily sleeping. Or so he had believed. Emily's voice came softly. "She woke up after you left." Richard turned. Emily was no longer seeing the consultation room. She was seeing the past. 2 years earlier, she had been 23, volunteering 3 nights a week while completing a community nursing program. She had not yet entered religious life. That night, she had been delivering blankets when she heard crying from Lily's room. The child was alone. "Where's my daddy?" Lily had asked. Emily sat beside her. "He'll come back. Mommy too." Emily had no answer to that. So she stayed. Outside, thunder rolled across Boston. Inside, a cheap projector scattered blue stars across the ceiling. Emily read Lily a story. Then another. When Lily became frightened, Emily sang quietly until her breathing slowed. Richard lowered his eyes. He remembered returning near dawn and finding Lily asleep. He had never asked who had stayed with her. His entire world had been collapsing. But Emily's story did not end there. At around 3:15, Dr. Bennett said, Emily noticed something. Richard looked up. Lily had stopped responding normally. Her breathing had changed. Her skin had become unusually pale. The monitor had not yet triggered an alarm. Emily had tried waking her. Nothing. She ran into the hallway, Bennett continued. She found a nurse and demanded someone examine Lily immediately. Emily shook her head. "I didn't demand anything. You refused to leave until they listened." Richard stared at her. Dr. Bennett's expression grew solemn. Lily was developing an internal complication. Within minutes, her blood pressure collapsed. Richard's face lost its color. "We rushed her into emergency treatment." The room became unbearably quiet. Richard remembered receiving the call upstairs. He remembered running down 3 flights because the elevator seemed too slow. He remembered doctors surrounding his daughter. But until this moment, he had never known what happened before that call. "Are you saying," his voice broke. "She found it? She noticed it?" Emily looked uncomfortable. "Anyone could have." "No," Bennett said firmly. "Everyone else thought Lily was sleeping." Richard turned toward Emily. Hours earlier, he had accused this woman of pretending to care. Now she sat beside his daughter without asking for recognition, gratitude, or even an apology. Lily rested her head against Emily's shoulder. Then she whispered something that made Richard's chest tighten. "She promised I wouldn't be alone." Emily looked down at her. "And you weren't." Richard slowly sat across from them. For the first time that evening, he had nothing to command. Nothing to purchase. Nothing to control. Only one question remained. "Why did nobody ever tell me your name?" Emily's eyes lowered. Dr. Bennett answered instead. "Because by the time you finally asked who had stayed with Lily that night, Emily Carter was already gone." Richard stared at Dr. Bennett. "Gone where?" Emily's fingers tightened around Lily's hand. For the first time since entering the room, she seemed reluctant to speak. Dr. Bennett answered quietly. "Her mother was dying." Richard's expression changed. Emily looked down. 3 days after Lily's emergency, Emily had received a call from a small town in Vermont. Her mother's cancer had advanced faster than anyone expected. She left Boston that morning. No ceremony. No goodbye beyond a handwritten note left with the pediatric nurses. By the time Richard began asking questions, Emily Carter was hundreds of miles away, sitting beside another hospital bed. "I'm sorry," Richard said. Emily gave a faint nod. "She died 6 weeks later." The words were simple. That made them heavier. Lily looked up at Emily. "Your mommy?" Emily smiled sadly. "Yes." Lily squeezed her hand. Richard watched the gesture and felt something inside him collapse. While he had been grieving Caroline, convinced that no one could understand what had happened to his family, Emily had been losing her own mother. And still, she had stayed with his frightened daughter when she could have walked past that hospital room. "What happened after?" Richard asked. Emily glanced at the silver cross resting against her chest. "I changed." She had abandoned her nursing program for nearly a year. She worked temporary jobs, cared for her mother's affairs, and spent months asking herself why some people entered our lives for only a few hours yet remained with us forever. Eventually, she found her answer in service. She entered St. Agnes. Not because she wanted to disappear from the world. Because she wanted to remain useful inside it. Richard looked toward the closed door. Beyond it waited a ballroom filled with people who knew him as a philanthropist. His name appeared on hospital wings. His foundation had donated millions. Yet the person who had protected Lily when it mattered most had owned almost nothing. And an hour earlier, he had treated her as though she were beneath him. "I accused you of using my daughter." Emily said nothing. "I threatened to have you removed." Still nothing. Richard's voice lowered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily finally met his eyes. "Would you have listened?" The question contained no cruelty. That made it devastating. Richard remembered cutting her off. "Tell me how you know her name." "Not here," she had said. "No," he had answered. He had demanded truth while making it impossible for her to give it with dignity. Richard lowered his head. "No," he admitted. "I probably wouldn't have." Dr. Bennett remained silent. There was nothing to add. Then Richard noticed Lily reaching into Emily's canvas bag. "Lily," Emily whispered, almost laughing. "You still do that?" The girl pulled out a small children's book. Its blue cover was faded at the edges. Lily froze. Richard recognized it. The Moon Who Was Afraid of the Dark. Caroline had bought Lily the same book before the accident. Lily opened the cover. Inside, written in faded ink, were 4 words. "For Lily. Be brave. Emily." Richard's breath caught. "You kept it?" Emily shook her head. "She did." Dr. Bennett stepped closer. "It stayed in hospital storage after Lily was discharged. I found it months later. When I learned Sister Carter was coming tonight, I asked that it be returned." Lily pressed the book against her chest. Then she looked at her father. "Daddy?" Richard swallowed. "Yes, sweetheart." Her next words were barely audible. "Emily didn't leave me." Richard closed his eyes. No, he realized. Emily had never abandoned his daughter. Life had simply pulled 2 grieving people in different directions. And now fate had placed them in the same room again. Only this time, Richard had nearly separated them himself. Richard remained seated long after the truth had settled over the room. For years, people had apologized to him. Contractors apologized when projects ran late. Executives apologized when numbers missed expectations. Employees apologized when meetings began 3 minutes behind schedule. Richard Whitmore was accustomed to receiving apologies. He had never learned how difficult it was to give one when it truly mattered. He looked at Emily. "I was wrong." Emily said nothing. Richard stood slowly. "No. That isn't enough." He glanced toward the closed doors leading back to the gala. "I humiliated you in front of everyone. You were afraid for Lily. That doesn't excuse what I did." For the first time, Emily saw something different in his face. Not authority. Shame. Richard opened the door. Nathan was waiting outside with several concerned guests. Beyond him, conversations quieted as Richard stepped into the marble lobby. Emily remained inside. Richard turned back. "Please." She hesitated. Then Lily took her hand. Together, they walked out. The same people who had watched Richard order the young nun away now watched him stand beside her. Richard faced the room. "A little while ago, I treated Sister Emily Carter as though her appearance gave me the right to decide her intentions. No one moved. I questioned her character. I embarrassed her. And I threatened to have security remove her." The security officer lowered his eyes. Richard swallowed. "I was wrong." A murmur moved through the crowd. Richard turned toward Emily. 2 years ago, while my family was living through the worst night of our lives, this woman stayed beside my daughter when I couldn't." Emily's eyes lowered. She noticed something others missed. She called for help when Lily's condition changed. And because she refused to walk away. His voice broke. He looked at Lily. "My daughter is standing here tonight." The lobby went completely silent. Richard had negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions without losing his composure. Now he could barely finish a sentence. "I spent years believing that protecting Lily meant controlling who came near her." He looked back at Emily. "But fear made me cruel to someone I never bothered to understand." Emily stepped closer. "Mr. Whitmore." "Richard." She paused. "Richard, you were trying to protect your daughter." "I know." His eyes remained on hers. "But protection without humility can become something else." Emily studied him for a moment. Then she spoke softly. "Fear does that to people." Richard seemed surprised. "You're not angry?" "I was hurt." The honesty struck harder than anger would have. "But I also know what grief can turn us into when we let it make decisions for us." Richard's eyes flickered toward Lily. Emily continued. "You don't owe me for staying with her that night. I owe you more than I can repay." "No." Her answer was immediate. "That's the part you still don't understand." Richard froze. Emily knelt beside Lily and adjusted the faded blue book in the child's arms. She didn't need someone important that night. She needed someone who stayed. Lily leaned against her. Emily looked up at Richard. "And tonight, she needed you to listen." Nothing in Richard's fortune could protect him from the truth of that sentence. He lowered his head. Across the marble lobby, no one applauded. No one needed to. Some lessons became smaller when surrounded by noise. Richard looked at the woman he had judged by a plain habit and worn shoes. Then at the daughter who had remembered her for 2 years. For once, he did not try to control what happened next. He simply asked. "What does Lily need from me now?" Emily smiled gently. "Ask her." Richard looked down at his daughter. For most of Lily's life, he had believed being a good father meant having answers before she needed them. Tonight, for perhaps the first time, he asked a question without already deciding what the answer should be. He crouched until they were eye level. "What do you need, sweetheart?" Lily looked at Emily. Then at the blue book pressed against her chest. "Will Emily be here tomorrow?" The question was simple. Richard felt its weight immediately. For 2 years, he had searched for ways to help Lily move forward. New doctors. New schools. New routines. Yet perhaps moving forward did not always mean leaving everything behind. Richard glanced at Emily. "If Sister Emily wants to be." Lily turned hopefully. Emily smiled. "I can come tomorrow." A tiny smile appeared on Lily's face. It was not dramatic. No one gasped. But Richard stared as though he had just witnessed something impossible. Lily smiled again. Then she opened the faded book. "Read it." Emily sat beside her on a lobby bench. "Only if your father says it's okay." Richard's throat tightened. He nodded. "It's okay." The gala slowly resumed around them. Glasses clinked again. Conversations returned. The pianist found his melody. But something had changed. Richard no longer stood at the center of the room. He sat quietly beside his daughter while Emily began reading from the book she had once read beneath blue hospital stars. Months passed. Richard kept his promise to change, not through another donation, but through smaller choices no newspaper would ever report. He began listening before deciding. He stopped treating Lily's silence as a problem to solve. And every Thursday afternoon, whenever Sister Emily's duties allowed, she visited St. Catherine's. Sometimes Lily talked. Sometimes she drew. Sometimes they simply sat together. Richard learned that silence did not always mean something was wrong. Sometimes silence was where trust grew. The Whitmore Foundation continued supporting children's rehabilitation, but Richard changed one policy personally. Every major planning meeting would now include nurses, volunteers, caregivers, and support workers, the people whose names rarely appeared on plaques but whose hands often held families together. When someone suggested naming a new pediatric wing after Sister Emily, she refused. "Put the children's names somewhere instead," she said. Richard smiled. This time, he understood. Nearly a year after the gala, he found Emily and Lily sitting beneath a tree outside St. Catherine's. Lily was reading aloud. Her voice was stronger now. Emily listened without correcting her. When Lily finished, she looked toward her father. "Daddy, come sit." Richard joined them. No assistant. No phone. No schedule. Just a father, his daughter, and the woman he had once believed did not belong near her. He looked at Emily's worn shoes and remembered how quickly he had judged them. Then he remembered the hospital room. The blue stars. The storm. The young woman who had stayed when there was nothing to gain. Richard had spent his life measuring value in numbers large enough to impress entire rooms. But the most valuable gift his daughter had ever received had cost nothing. It was simply someone refusing to leave a frightened child alone. And perhaps that was why Lily remembered Emily's name when so many others had forgotten hers. Because dignity has never depended on wealth, clothing, titles, or the rooms a person is allowed to enter. Sometimes it is revealed in the quietest act of all. Staying when someone needs you.